Tracy is our founder and director of our charity here in the southeast of FASD Awareness. And I felt it was really important over the recent series of webinars that you got an insight into who Tracy Allen, the whirlwind that is Tracy Allen, who she is. So Tracy has often been affectionately referred to as a dog with a bone. She gets things done. She's very persuasive and is a fantastic and fierce advocate for FASD individuals and families in fighting their corner. She has an empathy and an understanding that can only come from someone who has lived on the precipice and been stigmatized, and yet found the necessary hope and help to develop strategies to provide the positive outcomes for both her charges and her family. Now, quietly over the last 15 years, Tracy has supported so many families, and the letters and the emails that we receive here at FASD Awareness are a real testament to her great work. I'm therefore delighted to be able to introduce you to Tracy Allen. Welcome, Tracy.
Thank you for having me.
It's really important that everybody understands really the great work that you've been doing. But of course, it has to have come from somewhere. And the best way of understanding that is understanding really, where did it come from for you? Where did it start from you? Let's take it right back to the little Tracy many years ago. Give us a bit of an insight into your early background, please.
So I was born in the 60s in Perth, Australia, to a very young mum who went out on a journey as a 10-pound pom back then, looking for a new life, a new adventure, and didn't particularly work out as she dreamed of, I don't think. And we packed our bags and landed at Southampton docks at the age of 2 and came home to live in England with my birth family here, 3 very strong ladies, and we lived together 3 generations, as you can imagine, in a little terrace house in the, well, by then sort of the 70s really. And that was the journey.
What happened then when you came back, came over to this country? You know, the 70s was a real cultural shift, wasn't it? So how was that for you, coming from Australia over to Great Britain?
Well, obviously back then England was not very diverse, should I say, and coming back without a dad, trying to fit into a normal average street where everyone had mums and dads and cars and dogs, and I sort of rocked up with my mum, and she looked more like my sister, and I tried to fit in and just be a young girl. And within the street there was lots of families coming from all over the world and joining our street, which I found amazing. It was just thrilling for me, somebody that really didn't fit into the normal sort of 2.4 family. I was able to sort of house hop, should I say, into these other worlds of cultural delights, of different saris and bangles and food and incense, and I just totally got immersed in it and loved every moment of it, and made some new friends who really accepted me, because I found there was a lot of prejudice back in the 60s and 70s, and especially if you were a child born out of wedlock, should I say. People made that quite verbal, as I can remember walking down the street and a little 6-year-old little girl just going to the shop to buy some sweets, and people would shout out "bastard." And I didn't even know what the word was, and I come back and my mum was like, "What did they say?" And I was a bit like, it was, I didn't really understand what that prejudice was then, and what I was really exposed to as a young girl. But it's lived with me, and it's made me realise how important it is to feel connected and fitting in and belonging and everything else.
And of course, the thing is as well, even though you might not have understood what the word meant,
no.
Frequently you do feed off your mother's reactions or your parents' reactions, and at that time I guess that would amplify in your mind, deep rooted into your mind.
Yeah, and obviously I was back then, quite a lively child, if you could imagine. I'm quite a lively person now. People sort of find it hard to keep up with me. So um, I sort of probably channeled it, not really even realizing, into quite negative behaviors at the time, because I didn't feel like I fitted anywhere and maybe wasn't accepted like the other children.
Can you give us some sort of examples? What sort of behaviours would you have called, naughty behaviours for
Yeah,
you?
naughty, definitely naughty. I mean, some of the things that I used to do, my cousins will tell you that, they used to hate me coming around to play because I would break all the dolls' furniture, or I was just looking for attention really, and looking for interaction, and, not really fitting in with ages as well. So they would be a lot older than me, and they were sort of into David Essex and Shawaddy Waddy, and I wanted to, play with the slinky down the stairs and things like that. So because they wouldn't play with me, I'd break the slinky, and of course everything was quite negative, just trying to get the attention. But
So when did that change? When did you start seeing a change in your own behaviours?
um I went to senior. I was quite intelligent. I passed my 11 plus, which I'm still amazed at even to this day, because I didn't ever study. So naturally, I must have had some sort of academic ability back then. I never went to a grammar school, but I did then end up going into, obviously, secondary school. And I was more into art and probably practical things at that point. I probably could have done a lot more academically if I'd been pushed. But then I started to obviously be a bit naughty at school. I can remember I got excluded from maths, so I never done a GCSE, and obviously that reputation went with me. So it was quite hard to sort of turn that round until I left school, because quite liked it, quite lived up to it. It was quite exciting.
It was the attention that you'd been looking for.
It was, yeah,
So
definitely.
what changed that then? Because, we see you now as this person, this great advocate, and, very thoughtful and passionate about what you do. But where did that change? Where did your life change at that point?
I think the thing is, if somebody invests in you and they've got a belief in you, and they verbalise that and they tell you can achieve, even though you might fight it, it's sort of being drip fed into you. And then at some point, sometime or somewhere or something happens, and you actually think, oh, I can change. There's a couple of paths you go down in life. We've all probably been down it, where there's the good path and the bad path. And we sort of sometimes can veer off of those paths and pull ourselves back on. And I sort of done that a few times, nothing major, but looking back, it was just teenage behaviour probably. But then my nan was a very motherly figure, and she always gave me self-belief that I could achieve anything if I put my mind to it. And I know I could do that, probably very, very easily negatively, but I could also apply it in a positive way. So it was flipping it over into sort of finding my niche in a more positive way, and the attention in that way as well. So that's where, as I got older, I realized that I could, work, say, for instance, and go into a workplace and succeed, have friendship groups that I was included in and belonged in. The sort of stigma that I had as a young child, it sort of diminished really as time went on, and I became more confident and I grew as a person.
Now, one of the sort of major benchmark periods in your life was when you met Paul. Paul, who stood by you thick and thin throughout everything. And actually, I joke about it that my wife and we are such an effective team. And it's that team, and I include my own boys in that group, actually, that we are a united team and we work so effectively and efficiently together. Now, of course, when you're in a team like that, you identify in others, and you and Paul and your family are very much a team. Tell us about when you first met Paul.
So we met at 17, and we both came from, completely opposites of family life. He came from a very large family, lots of brothers and sisters, and I was at the time an only child. I have got brothers and sisters that I've met now, but back when I was in England, I was the only child. So when we met at a very young age, 17, we didn't know what that was going to look like, if we were going to stay together, and we sort of connected, and everything that I wasn't, he was, and vice versa. So it really did make a good team as a starting block, really. And we just went with it. We just went with it. We had nothing when we started off on our journey, and we just sort of was young and free. And, you know, I'd never even been on holiday, you know, so we had our first holiday at 18, and, you know, it was amazing. So we just sort of went with what we had at the time, and tried to sort of strive for something more than what we had as children ourselves. So it was a bit like trying to make up for what we didn't have, but learn from what we did have as well. And
yeah, of course. Now, you know, obviously a massive part of your relationship was when you both decided to become foster carers. Can you tell us what made you choose to become foster carers?
I think for us, because of our backgrounds, we wanted to give something back. We wanted to support other, you know, children, and we had 3 children by that time ourselves. And as you can imagine, I was in retail and trying to get childcare. It was really hard, and my house was like old Mother Hubbard's house. You know, the summer holidays, you know, Paul would come home and it would just be chaos. There'd be like swimming pools everywhere and kids everywhere and fish fingers everywhere. And one of my friends said to me, why don't you foster? You know, your house, you're so good with the kids. Why don't you be a foster mum? And I was like, what's a foster mum? You know, I didn't even know what it was. And then that journey sort of evolved. She introduced me to her agency, and then we had some placements coming through, and then, you know, the rest sort of emerged from that time. And I gave up the retail.
Let me take you back a little bit, if I may, because I know there are many foster carers. There are potential adopters that come and watch these webinars, and the Form F, a lot of people refer to it as the dreaded Form F, but actually the Form F, can you explain what the Form F is and why it's such an intimate document, really?
It's lovely. I mean, does take a little bit of time. It's quite, I won't say intrusive in a nasty way. It's really reflective. You know, it really sort of brings everything together as you as a couple, your values. It brings in, you know, people in your network, their views of you, their references. You look at your parenting styles. You look at maybe the things that have gone wrong for you, how you've overcome them.
I was going to add to that. Of course, you know, for those that don't know, the Form F is the assessment form that goes into detail on your personal life, your history of both of you as a couple and your children, and it's done by an independent social worker. They come along, they assess you through a series of interviews, and then that is presented to a panel that decides whether you are capable or worthy. Yes, exactly. So sorry, yeah, let me carry on with what you were saying. And what about that finding out a little bit about the intimacy about you and your relationship? It helps you assess your own relationship.
Oh, totally. I mean, my relationship with my husband, he's amazing, and he's my rock, if I'm being honest. I wouldn't be anywhere without him, and my children, and my extended family and friends. They've all been so supportive. And, you know, what I am probably, and we sort of explained it in our Form F, and we laugh about it now, as I'm like this little red balloon blowing away and trying to wander off, and my husband is the anchor that pulls me back down and grounds me. So between us, it is a good team, and we've both got different ideas that we bring to the table in parenting, and also we've got, you know, different backgrounds and different values. So we pulled it all together and tried to create the Allen family, which, you know, without the Allen family, I don't know, you know, what we would have done, you know, with all of those strengths and, you know, the pitfalls that we've overcome together. It's really been a journey, and I wouldn't have changed the world.
Well, let's go back a little bit. So you've just started fostering,
Yeah.
and it's a wake up call, isn't it?
Yeah.
You jump both feet in and you're ready for it. You're all geared to go, and then it's a complete wake up call.
Green behind the ears, definitely.
Absolutely. Tell us a little bit about you know, how it first started for you. What were you presented with first of all?
So we was presented with respite, which was lovely, and then we were presented with some children that they wanted us to do on a long-term basis, which we put ourselves forward for. And you know, we didn't really understand what we were really. We was quite young and quite naive, if I'm being honest, and we thought, you know, we treat them and bring them into our family and fix them, you know. they come over the door and it's all going to be like the Brady Bunch. And that's what we really did think, that, you know, it would all work out splendidly. The journey would be so easy. But obviously, you know, life, whether they're fostered, whether they're your birth children, life has its ups and downs. And as parents, we've just tried to, you know, support and overcome them and learn by our mistakes and celebrate our successes.
So over the years of fostering, which has been what, over 20 years now?
Near enough, yeah, yeah.
In all those years of fostering, can you give us a list of some of the different sort of disabilities that you've cared for or behaviours that you've had to manage?
Yeah. So we've had quite a few children come through the Allen door. We've had a young man with Williams syndrome, and we've had.
What is Williams syndrome?
So it's genetically, it can be handed down. It's like a learning disability. They can be very emotional. There's sort of certain traits with the disability. When you see people, not everyone's got the same traits, but they've got quite big gaps in their teeth, and they can become very emotional and overwhelmed very easily. But then on the other hand, they can become quite aggressive as well. So it's a very complex sort of disability. And I think what I've learned about the people that have come through our door, whether they're autistic, Williams syndrome, FASD, whatever, you know, they're individuals, they're people. And I think, you know, we've all got our little ways and our little things that we have got that aren't perfect. But from my point of view, I've always wanted to treat them with respect and just look at them as a person or a little person, and try and work with them and, you know, help them, whatever that looks like, whatever that means for them.
Absolutely. So, you know, we're here as, you know, founder of a charity about FASD. So where did your journey of FASD start?
So obviously we've been caring for children with this condition for many years, and we've really at certain points of it really struggled to understand it, because if you think 15 years ago, not many people knew what it was. Most people thought you could only have FAS, and you know, that was the only thing that was recognised, and you had to have the facial features. So anything other than that wasn't even on the radar for anybody, and even a lot of professionals, you know, believed that you had to have the facial features. So we really struggled for many years to get the support, the understanding, you know, just to manage it, and to be able to even get the right schooling and the right environments, the right medication. There was a list of things that we were struggling with to try and.
So, sorry to interrupt, but just going back to understanding when it started for you. So you had 2 placements.
Yeah.
And can you tell us a little bit about when you first presented with it, what information did you get about FASD? Or did they have diagnosis? Did they not have a diagnosis?
No. One had a diagnosis, but when we asked what it was, we was told that it was just, oh, you know, they're not the brightest button, and you know, it's not a problem. It's a bit of like global development delay, and I didn't even know what that was. So I was a bit like, oh, you know, it meant as much to me as having a whitlow or a cold sore. You know, I didn't know what it was, and we didn't have phones then and Google search, and you didn't have all the resources that you can just quickly research something now on your phone and think, oh, what's that? You know, oh, that's what it is. You know. Because I was sort of led by professionals and didn't really question it either, being quite young. Yeah. So we was a bit like, okay, well, we'll go with whatever that is. And, you know, they're not flagging anything up, so it must be okay. And we just go with, which we did for many, you know, for a few years. And obviously, like most people, you have, well, not most people, but with fostering, there's usually a bit of a honeymoon period with children that come into the placements where they're on their best behaviour, and it's not even best behaviour. They're scared. You know, they're scared. It's a new environment. They don't know what to expect. So they're probably quite traumatised as well, and everything else. You know, they've got lots of other layers, trauma, attachment disorders, and you know, for the first few probably year and a half, it was a settling in period. So we was just learning about each other, learning how to work as a family and a team, and just live alongside each other. But then we started to realise that things probably weren't as we thought, and, you know, things change a little bit, and we started to need some support and a greater understanding for us as well as the people we were supporting, so that we could hopefully do a good job. which
Now,
there
yeah,
wasn't that there then.
exactly. And again, a lot of the professionals at the time had even less understanding than they do today about FASD. Now, with that comes a sort of misdirection sometimes, and you hit a crisis point, didn't you? You often refer, when we have our support groups at FASD awareness and your one-to-one sessions, you refer to your crisis point. Can you tell us a little bit about how that happened? When did crisis point hit for you, and then how did you come out of it?
Well, we had 5 children, and obviously, as they all developed and grew, life changed and demands changed, and what we wanted as a family, we thought we would be able to meet everybody's needs, and we're very much in the fact that everyone's an individual, and we wanted to tick all the boxes. When one wants to go on the ski slopes, the other one's doing football, the other one's dancing, and we've got this going on. It was quite a big task to sort of meet the needs of 5 children. And even though me and Paul worked so well as a team, and we did manage it, we started to realise that with the other children that were under our care, that they needed a little bit more, and they weren't making the milestones, they weren't achieving in the way, and we didn't have the education back then of how to put things into place. And when we was asking for support and advice, the people we were asking didn't even know. So it was all in a bit of a stalemate, really. And it came to a crisis point where, sorry, a little drink. We all sat down, me and my husband, one day with the children, and said, this isn't working. We're not meeting the foster children's needs, we're not meeting our birth children's needs, we're not even meeting our needs as a couple. We can't continue this way. It was just going to end up with a car crash. And we were contemplating, and I think back then we did consider closing the placements, because it just wasn't manageable, and it wasn't really doing anybody any good. It was really difficult for everybody, and I was questioning our ability, and not only our ability, but I was questioning, I'm meant to be doing something really worthwhile and positive here, and it didn't feel like that at the time.
And I think, any foster carer that's been in that position will understand that you want the best for the individual, and you question whether your environment is able to manage those needs, and whether they'll be better suited to a different environment, whether it's just a single person caring for them, would they manage it better, or whether it's fewer children in the house. Of course you question it, but obviously you've had that conversation with Paul, you've had the conversation with the children, you've got teenagers, which is always difficult in itself anyhow, and you've got 2 girls, teenage girls, heavens above. But what about when you came to that point? Who listened to you? How did you come through that? Tell us a bit about that.
Well, I think we just put our cards on the table. We're really honest, as much as it might felt that we were failing. If I'm being honest, it was, we needed to be transparent about it, and we spoke with the local authority that they were under. We explained the situation. There was a crisis meeting. We told them exactly what was going on. They rat round, and we had more meetings, as you can imagine. And I think people realised, that they needed to try and scaffold and help us to achieve it. It wasn't that we didn't want to do it. We just needed some support to do it more successfully, because we had the foundations there, and we wanted to continue, but we just knew that to continue, we needed more professional support, really.
And how did that? Who helped you? Who were the names that the people that really helped you?
Well, I'm going to embarrass somebody here tonight. So, saving grace was a paediatrician who is amazing to this day. He's our saviour, I call him. Is Dr. Abiona, who I think might be watching. Soji. We was referred to him at our local hospital, and he didn't know me from Adam, and it was nice to meet somebody that was really kind and listened, and he offered to support us, and he knew about FASD and FAS, so that in itself was just, oh my God, it's somebody that understands and can help us. So we had some meetings with him over the course of a few months, and he actually took the time out of one of his clinics to come with us to London and advocate for us to other professionals, because I think it's all well and good. Like, I know a lot of people maybe in the audience as mums, us mums can keep, you know, going like a dog with a bone and venting and ranting, and in the end professionals go, I don't want to keep listening to you. But if another professional comes in, actually sometimes they might take a little bit more heed and listen a little bit more. So Soji took his time out, and it really did help, because I think then having another professional to the professionals, it then had that ripple effect down the chain, that things started to move in a more positive way for all of us.
And I always remember, and I mean, we've had Soji on here doing one of our webinars, and one of the clear things with Soji, he's very clear about how he explains things. And to a lay person, you need that clarity. You need it in simple terms, first of all, don't you? To be able to not let the science get in the way, to be able to understand it clearly. And that was something that really helped you, didn't it?
Oh, totally. And you know, what was one thing that wasn't very clear, though, that I had been working with his wife for nearly 10 years and didn't even realise they were married with another charity that I worked for. So, you know, he was very good at explaining the FASD. But no, I mean, it was so nice to have somebody that genuinely understood the condition way back then, and took the time out to advocate for us, and you know, help the children at the end of the day. That's what he done.
And so where did that take you then? What was the next stage for you after you've got that advocacy? You've got a better understanding yourself, and you've got people now understanding the condition and understanding. You had the diagnosis, didn't you? So
yeah, we had one with a diagnosis, which was great, but then there wasn't really an assessment that followed the diagnosis. So it was a bit like, you've got the diagnosis, but we don't really know what that means. So when Soji got involved, then everything sort of like started to fit into place. So we never really had respite. So we started to get some regular respite with people that really understood the condition and that had that consistency, so that there was that stability. Because, you know, changing a child with FASD to different carers all the time is really confusing, and it can be really unsettling. So respite was key. And then we had, you know, assessments which came in. So we was then able to put the right support package in place on the back of the assessments, which was really, really good. Then we started to get a little bit more support so that we could have and meet the needs of the other children. Because when you've got a child with quite a lot of complexities, you focus on them, they need your attention, but then that distracts it from everybody else who feels neglected and their needs aren't being met. So what we found we got was a balance. We started to balance up the family, and not only did the other children get their needs met, so did we as a couple. So we was feeling a little bit more refreshed that we could continue. So it really worked well.
Other than Soji, who was your other Tracy, if you like? Who was your Tracy? Who did you go to for that support and advice?
I'd love to thank her in person. I have thanked her once at the FAS ball that helped fund the charity in the initial stages. But Susan Fleischer, who was the CEO of NoFAS back then, she was amazing. I can remember getting on the phone to her crying at times, and you know, I was at my wit's end with behaviours where I just didn't understand how to manage them, what to do, how to react, and she would talk me through in a really small, calm Canadian voice, and we would laugh, and I'd come off the phone feeling totally connected to what she was saying, and being able to feel refreshed that I could go forward and maybe put some of those strategies in place that I'd not even thought about. So, you know, I really thank her from the bottom of my heart, because without that lifeline of me getting on the phone to her, and her, you know, one thing she said to me was, you've got to learn to try and make the behaviours not so negative, and maybe laugh together about them and learn and try and problem solve them together. And that's what we've done, I think, as a family, you know, whether it be me with that individual, or as a family network, we pull together and, you know, learn from each other and look at how we can overcome them, and maybe have a bit of a laugh on the way. Got to have a personality, I think.
Well, we certainly do that. then, of course, you know, with all this experience, you've then established a pretty good working basis, because I know, you know, having seen you working with schools and educating the schools about how to better manage the behaviours in the classroom and understand it and totally twist it on its head. The sort of the behaviours, and we'll go into that a little bit later when we come to ask you some of your key tips. But what I wanted to talk to you about now was, why on earth did you start going down the road of trying to set up a charity? Because, you know, can we, just before we go into that question, prior to that, you've got a wealth of experience, haven't you, in a lot of charity Medway mediation and various other. Tell us a little bit about some of the other skills that you picked up, because as a foster carer, you get trained.
Yeah.
A lot of training that you're able to take on. But in addition to that, you went down your own road and looked at a lot of areas. Can you tell us a little bit about some of those?
Yeah, I mean, I volunteered for 10 years for a charity, Medway Mediation, and my boss there, Sue, she was amazing as well. She invested in me, which I think helps me invest in other people now. So, you know, when you're a mum, you know, you sort of think, oh, I'm just a mum, you know. And she sort of saw me more than just a mum, and she said, no, you go on this course, you know, do a mediation course, do anger management course, do family group conference course, you know. And then all of a sudden I'm doing all of these courses, and then I'm training, and I'm training the trainer, and you know, it just sort of over 10 years my skills, my confidence grew. And then I realized, actually, I can do this, I can achieve. And you know, it was lovely to give back and go into schools and work with some of the little 6-year-olds that had anger management problems. You know, it was heart-wrenching. But when the 6-week course was over and they came back, and they, you know, the teachers were saying, oh my God, they've really changed. It was lovely for me to think that I had a little part of that, and that I sort of empowered them really to take control of some of their behaviours. So I'm a real advocate of empowering people to be able to take more control over their lives and their destiny, really.
And that's really, I mean, you've summed it up there. That's exactly why you ended up going down the road of starting a charity, didn't you? Tell us a little bit about that journey.
Yeah, I mean, there were, for me and my friend Sharon Jackson, who obviously, you know, a lot of people that are on these calls now and will know of her and her journey. We both supported each other way back in the early days, you know, with strategies and just support. There wasn't really support groups out there. There wasn't stuff. And the charity was born because we both had a belief that we both had struggled over the years, and, you know, we didn't want other families to struggle. And that was the bottom line, really. We'd learned so much. We wanted to be able to, you know, put into place something so that there was a go-to place, you know, especially locally where we lived, because, you know, even for me, you know, even though I linked with NoFAS in London at the time, I couldn't get on the train for their Saturday morning support groups with like all the kids. It just wasn't manageable. I know life's changed now with COVID and lots of things are virtual, so it's more accessible for everybody, which is great, no matter where you are in the country. But, you know, for me, I just wanted to be able to support other families, educate people, maybe offer support, or even just a listening ear. I think just sometimes having someone to talk to that has got that empathy and understanding. And when you come to some of our groups, and especially like our family activity days, and you see everyone connect, and there's just a sense of calm, and the kids just love it because they all connect and get each other. So it's so worthwhile from my point of view that we've managed to get the charity to where it is. And
Absolutely.
it's
And
lovely that
I
family.
think, you know, one of the loveliest things about the ethos of the charity is the fact that we're a great little unit. It's a very fun bunch of people we've got some amazing volunteers that come in. We've got an amazing board of trustees with a huge skill set, and everyone's motivated. They're invested in the drawing a greater awareness of FASD. But not only that, as you said, you know, the support for those locally, but in the last 4 years, we've gone from a local initiative to a national charity, supporting with our friendship groups and our support groups and the one-to-one sessions. Tell us a little bit about how that's evolved in the time that you've started?
Yeah, I mean, you know, way back when I first started, it was very small and it was very intimate, and you know, I would just be there would be just a phone number and people would just randomly phone me up, and I would just be in the middle of Tesco's and, you know, oh, just go to the car and we'll have a conversation sort of thing. And then as time's grown and the charity's grown, it's the one-to-ones have just, you know, really taken off. I think having those connections with people, and I think because I can resonate with them, and when they're talking to me about some of their situations, I've already experienced them. I'm not saying I'm an expert. I'm an expert in what I've, you know, my family and what we've experienced, but having that mutual sort of understanding, and it helps, I think, people to maybe express what they're going through, and that they're not feeling judged. And I'm very inclusive. My whole ethos, you know, with not only the charity but with my business, is inclusion. You know, it doesn't matter where you come from, what sort of person you are, you know, what your disability is. I really value people, and I think that for me is key. And when you're coming to a charity like our charity, it doesn't matter who you are, even if you're a professional that, you know, just wants to come in and, you know, get some advice, just, you know, pick up the phone, email, and, you know, you're welcome. Everyone's welcome.
And that little 6-year-old Tracy is certainly fulfilling what she felt, and that
yeah.
early experiences is manifesting itself now. And you know, we have a real mixed bag of people that come in and ask of your services on one-to-one sessions. But also, one of the great things is when you see somebody who's been on a one-to-one session with you some months earlier that were at their crisis point, and then they come and join the support groups, and they're able to offer their experience and their advice to others that are just coming for the first time, joining, that need to just sound off, or be able to know that there's others out there of a like mind that are struggling, and that actually you have been through there. You've got some of the answers, not all of the answers necessarily, but I'll tell you what, you'll give it a really good go at trying to find a way to find strategies that will support those people. And actually, one of the great things now, of course, is the network of support that you've built around you and around the charity. There are so many other charities around the country that are, you know, little bodies here and there and larger organizations that are working collectively to the same ends. And, you know, we're in a huge state of play at the moment, which is very, very exciting. What I'd like to do now, if I may, because we had quite a lot of questions coming in saying, what are your greatest tips? What are the 5 main things that you really find are the most regular questions, or the advice that you would give others? And we've come up with, you know, you came up with 5. Your first one, it says it's understanding you, and you are the advocate and the specialist. Tell us more about that.
I think for me, I did always question when I went to assessments or meetings, or I was trying to get the children's needs met, or even just advocate, you know, for anything really, that because I was just a mum, I didn't feel that I was relevant, or I had the skills, or I could even maybe advocate in the way that I should have done. And I think now what I've learned is that as parents, you know, we're not perfect, but we live alongside these children day by day. We know them more than absolutely anybody else. So we are experts of our children, and to have the confidence to advocate for them and to challenge and question when professionals, don't get me wrong, I love professionals, you know, we need them in our lives, and they are really skilled in their own field, but they are not they're not the expert on your child. They might get a window for half an hour, maybe 3 hours, and an assessment, and that's great because they will bring their skills to the table in their recommendations for your child. But you know, you need to be able to sort of maybe feel that you're more of the expert, and to stand up and say, no, you know, this isn't what is going on really, or this is what is going on, and really push that for them so that, you know, you are their voice.
And you know, one of the things that we hear time and time again, it's around this fluctuating capacity. That moment when you take your individual into an assessment and they are able to deliver because it's a quiet room, they're focused because there's just one person talking to them and they answer perfectly. And you're thinking, no, this is not how it is. Tell us a little bit about fluctuating capacity.
Yeah. I mean, you know, part of my other hat with my supported living business is that when people are being assessed, and you know, there's a lot of areas around, you know, for me, having somebody's needs met in a really holistic way. And for me, this fluctuating capacity is where, you know, a lot of our guys will learn language that's learned, so they know how to do the lip service, say, for instance, and to be able to get through and by, to sort of like get in and out quickly and not be sort of questioned anymore. So they say all the right things at the right times. And if someone's coming in, you know, and I can imagine there's a few here where an ed psych's come in to do like an evaluation, sitting at the back of the class, and they've wrote their report, and you know, little Billy's been there and he's been perfect, but you know, every other day of the week he's been like running around and chucking a chair and whatever else. But it just sort of, you know, happens, doesn't it, that they have this fluctuating capacity. So for me, it's not just, it's about the environment. So if they're in the right environment, then obviously they can probably think clearer, and then they will give a better answer. And also for me, I think that confidence when they're there in that environment, if they are feeling supported, and then they will be able to make much more of informed decisions, that you know, that they can think straight, and they will be able to articulate some of their wishes and feelings, which is great. So, and that's the problem, you know, what it all depends where they are, who they're with.
And again, you know, it goes back to exactly what you're saying, that understanding you are the specialist, because if you're able to, it's about language as well, understanding the jargon, the language. So if you are able to go to the professional and say, you know, he's answering this today because actually his fluctuating capacity is such that he's focused, but any other day. And I think that's something that you, as an advocate and as a specialist in understanding, it's having that faith in your own ability to be able to talk to the professionals in a way that they understand, and also that you are able to explain it clearly. Is that how you see it?
It's that confidence, I think, you know, because I think, especially when things are going wrong, like anybody, whether it's, you know, making the cake and the recipe's gone wrong, you lack the confidence in your cooking then, don't you? So if you're caring for children and you know, things aren't going wrong, you are maybe thinking, oh, am I doing the right thing? And then your confidence might be slightly knocked, and then you question your own ability. But I think you've got to have that faith, you know, that, you know, nothing's always going to be perfect. You're not perfect, they're not perfect, but you're all working towards the same goals, and looking at them in a way where, you know, you are going to have to maybe be more of an advocate for them. And as they get older, it might change.
And we've had many support groups where some of the impassioned talks of some of our families are that they've gone in to talk to the professionals, and the professionals have no idea what FASD is. And so therefore they're combating their lack of understanding of the condition and undermining, sometimes embarrassing, the advocates, the parents and the foster parents and the adoptive parents. And they're the ones that know. And it's about really believe in yourself, trust in yourself, and go with that. I mean, I'm really glad you mentioned that. It's one of the first points, because it's something that we've seen in you, your development, and we've seen it also in so many of our families as they trust in their own ability to be able to advocate for those individuals. The second point, which is always a really good one, is talking about the strengths of the individual. That's the point you really picked up on. Can you tell us a bit more?
I love it. I love every child that I've, you know, come across with FASD or FAS. They've just got such personality, such inner strength, and they can achieve so much. And I think that's the thing, is I think in life with each other. Even we're very quick at being negative and, you know, pulling people to bits, even ourselves, and we don't see the positives in a lot of people and the world around us. And I think the young people, you know, they've got such strengths, and I think we need to really celebrate those and push them forward, and, you know, look at those strengths and how you can enhance them. And you know, there will be, you know, maybe the academic side maybe that they might struggle in, or whether it be maths or whatever it is. But then if they've got those strengths of like dancing or cooking or whatever it is that really captivates them, really pull upon that and push that forward, because they can really achieve, and it's so good for their self-esteem and their well-being, and also for you guys as parents to sort of be working in a more positive way, and in a place that they, you know, that they are really content. And when they, like we all know, when they're really enjoying something, they really are engaged in it, and you can't stop them, which is great.
Absolutely. And we've got next month, you know, on this very subject, we've been working closely with Nick Barrett on positive behavioural therapy. And next month, we're going to have him come in and do our webinar on positive behavioural therapy, because it is such an important part.
Absolutely brilliant.
Now, we've got a question that's come in. Said, would you suggest joining a support group before any behaviours begin? I sometimes feel like my 4-year-old is too well behaved, but I am so worried for the future. And, you know, this is something that we have very young parents with very young individuals that are saying, you know, at the moment, he's gorgeous. He's got that lovely little face. He's really sweet and cute, and the behaviours aren't starting. But then they're picking up on certain things that we're talking about, certain behaviours. What would your advice be?
Definitely. I mean, I look quite cute at that age, and I was a nightmare. So the earlier you can step in and sort of get some strategies, or just sort of see the warning signs, you can then, you know, dampen the fire down a lot earlier than firefighting when those behaviours really emerge because you didn't see them coming. And I think that's the thing. If you educate yourself early, you know, early diagnosis, early identification, early support plans, doing anything earlier will give you that, you know, that control as a family, and also be able to sort of help them navigate in a more positive way. And that's what I would definitely advise. And, you know, you'll learn from other families, and you'll think about things differently.
And actually, this leads us perfectly to point 3, which is about engagement and working as a family network with the person at the centre. Because this is, you know, you touched on it there. It's about changing your trained behaviours, that we're all brought up in a certain way, and we have that expectation that we are parenting like our parents parented us, because that's all we know. But we have to, with FASD, we flip it on its head, don't we?
Well, I did flip it on its head, and you know, we had to really look at everything. So even holidays, we had to really sort of change the environment. We had to change even discussions, how we would go to parents' evenings, you know, everything. We had to really change the way that we thought we were going to parent, you know, not only the foster children, but our birth children. And even us as a couple, we had to sort of evolve, you know, with what we were being presented with. Otherwise, we wouldn't have got through it. So even down to silly little things, you know, like if you can imagine there's 7 in the house and we're having a discussion that could get quite heated, it would be a free-for-all, and it wasn't getting anyone anywhere. So we got the wooden spoon. So we'd have the wooden spoon, and you could only talk if you had the wooden spoon, because I don't stop talking. So, you know, the wooden spoon would go around really quickly, and they'd sort of like bypass me to the next person and go around with the wooden spoon. So, you know,
we'd have that in our team meetings.
Yeah, you might have to get me a really big wooden spoon to stop me talking. But I think, you know, we had to really invent, you know, how we was going to go forward and wrap around as a team. And I think having the people in the centre of it, listening to them and working with them, because without them engaging with whatever, you know, it's all like me saying, oh, this is what's going to happen now, and this is the support plan, and this is how it's. If they're not engaged in that and they're not on board with it, it's not going to happen. So you're banging your head against the wall. So I think, you know, making sure that you're all on the same page and you're all working together is the best way forward, definitely.
Excellent. Now, we touched on it earlier, and this is the 4th point, is about understanding behaviours. Now, it's such a big subject, this, because I know in any behavioural condition or disability. It's understanding those behaviours will make you better informed in how to manage those. So give us your take on understanding FASD behaviours.
So what I've learned over the years is usually some of the negative behaviours are trying to express that they're out of their depth, that they can't cope, they need support, they don't know how to get it. So the behaviours will, burst out, outbursts, rage, or it could just be shutting down. It can be one or the other, or it just will be avoidance. And that's because they can't verbalise what they want, how they're feeling, if they like it or don't like it, or if they don't want to do it. And that comes maybe with time and, a lot of nurturing and effort and understanding that when they do actually have the words and they do express it, that they're not going to be, maybe told off or pushed into something they don't want to do. So you really do need to listen very early on when people say no, to respect that and not to push for that, because then they won't say no ever. So I think that's really key for me, is to really listen, really listen to how they're expressing it. And so when kids are, say, for instance, in the classroom and they're out of their depth and they're 13, 14, you're not going to put your hands up and say, I don't know what I'm doing, because it's embarrassing. You're not going to, then call somebody over and draw attention to yourself. So what are you going to do? You're the class clown, like I was, because I didn't do maths. I didn't know how to do it. So how did I get out of it? Act up, get sent out. Had lots of credibility then. Everyone thought I was cool. So it was much easier. But what really was going on was I didn't understand, algebra. And I didn't know what to do with it. And I wasn't going to stay there and be humiliated by the teacher. So I just got the get out card the way I thought was the best way to do it. So this is what I find a lot of them do. They meet their needs. They will do a behaviour to avoid, to get told off, put on the naughty step, whatever the strategy is, what parents do, because then they've got what they wanted, which was not to do what they couldn't do. So I think when behaviours start to spill out, really look at why those behaviours are coming out, and maybe look at going back a little bit to think, well, actually, what are they trying to tell me here? When they're screaming or kicking or biting or whatever,
It's all about reading in between the lines as well, isn't it? Because
yeah.
Quite often there might be a single little sentence that is thrown in that they are saying, and it might be jumbled up with a whole world of other words and questions and ideas coming through. And that you, as a parent that's learning to pick up on behaviours, you hear that, you pick up on that one, and you think there's got to be something, a nugget of truth.
A little trigger somewhere that's just maybe manifested that. It could have been the day before even. You start to look at patterns, you start to look at things differently, and then you start to problem solve like a detective. And then you start to think, that's why, it could be a smell, it could be, a light, it could be, I don't know, it could be absolutely anything that could trigger somebody. So, and I think for me, my learning like an anger management mentor, for me, that really sort of took me back to sort of looking at the anger side of it, because a lot of our guys can get very angry very quickly, and it's like looking at what the triggers were, what the environment was, and how we can support them to be able to maybe like look at pulling it back and then, problem solving with them.
And of course, there's understanding the behaviours. I mean, the person earlier that was saying, the viewer earlier that was saying about starting early with their 4-year-old. Again, having these strategies to learn and understand the behaviours, get in there early. Absolutely. Fantastic strategies. But it really, you mentioned earlier about how important it is to start early, get an early diagnosis, get a wraparound service that is supporting that individual, that's scaffolding them through their childhood, because that transition into adulthood, if that hasn't been implemented early on and you haven't got an understanding of that and you haven't got that engagement with that individual, then quite often it leads to negative outcomes. And we hear these horrible stories, and you have one-to-ones with some really, really dark stories of some of these negative outcomes, and it's very distressing. But it's about engagement, isn't it, as well, getting that engagement early on.
And I think also, the cost financially to the public purse and human life and just the time and everything, you know, not intervening earlier and putting those strategies in and the support and, you know, putting the funding in and recognising these things and then trying to firefight at the end. I mean, for me, I just find it so frustrating because I think, you know, please, all of, you know, any professionals here, you know, I know we're overstretched with funds and I know, but it's so cheaper to do it earlier for everybody than, you know, leaving it until a lot later, because some of the stories that, you know, I won't share today, but some of the stories that I hear could have been prevented. That's the sad thing, you know, the way that the life course has gone, and especially for sort of young individuals so early on to be in those situations.
But we're in a position now where, you know, certainly for the future, it bodes much better. I mean, we've been involved in this amazing document, which is The Time Is Now. It's the national perspective on ramping up FASD prevention, diagnosis and support services, and organised with Raja Mukherjee and Sandy Butcher of the National Organisation for FASD, and all the different groups up and down the country that specialise in managing FASD in their areas. They've all implemented in this. And this is like the Bible that will help CCGs, organisations and professionals understand better how to work with the new NICE FASD NICE guidelines, which has just come out. And I've got to say, you know, one of the most exciting things about the recent NICE guidelines, and I'm aware that we're running out of time rapidly, but the quality statement number 5 is the management plan. And it's children and young people with a diagnosis of fetal alcohol spectrum disorder have a management plan to address their needs. This is gold dust for us. This is what we've been advocating for so many years. And this is what local authorities will need to start implementing, educating, to be able to support these individuals as they move through their life. So we're really excited about this, and it is available. You can get a PDF download from the National Organisation for FASD from their website, if you want to have a look at that and take that to your local authority as an ammunition.
Slap it on the desk.
Absolutely. But it takes us to our final point that I want you to bring up, and that's like the final point is reaching out and connecting with others of a like mind. That was your final tip.
Yeah, definitely. You know, all of us need to connect. We all need to be able to support each other. And I think, especially now, you know, as we're progressing forward and it's being recognised, this condition, I think more people can, you know, put 2 and 2 together and think, oh, right, these are the connections. These are the people, whether you're, you know, you connect with us, the other organisations within the Alliance, you know, there's somebody out there that will listen to you, that can maybe help you, support you, signpost you in the right direction. And I think now's the time for everybody to sort of really consider reaching out. And even if it's just to say hi and bye, or even if you just pop in like and have a little bit of a group chat on one of the support groups or anything, just don't be on your own. And I think that's a lot of the people that I support, when they do come forward and they go, oh, I'm just so relieved that I'm not the only one. And, you know, there are people that are going through the same things. And one of the things is, oh, you all get me, and we can all laugh at some of the situations that the night before made us cry. And that's the reality of it. And that's what happens. You know, you're crying one minute because you're just so frustrated and, you know, you don't know what to do. And then you meet somebody else who was doing the same thing the night before, and you could be laughing at it together and supporting each other. So for me, definitely reach out.
That's brilliant. Tracy Allen, thank you so much for your time and wisdom.
not so much of the wisdom, but thank you for having me.
Good night, everybody.